The only watch that you'll ever need. A watch for every occasion. One watch to rule them all. And these are the things that you hear about the Patek Philippe Nautilus. That sounds pretty good. Let's try to get one. What? Yeah. Why don't I just sell my house and live in a cardboard box with my Patek? Hey guys, my name is Max and welcome back to Retro Watch. Today we're doing a watch build where I dip into the Seiko parts bin and see if I can capture the essence of the Patek Philippe Nautilus. You see, the Nautilus is a beautiful watch born out of a desperate time and really came to define a whole era of Swiss watchmaking. The story goes something like this. It was the late 60s, and the Swiss watch industry was gripped in the midst of the quartz crisis when cheap digital movements coming out of Japan flooded the market. Patek Philippe, one of the holy trinity of watchmakers, approached famous watch designer Gerald Genta for help. Genta had designed the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak just a few years back to great fanfare. So for this nautically themed watch, he was famously inspired by the porthole on a transatlantic ship and sketched it in 5 minutes while at dinner. And so the Nautilus was born. No longer able to compete on price or accuracy, Patek decided to go upmarket and try to convince people that mechanical watches were about something more aspirational than simple timekeeping. In a bold move, they priced the steel Nautilus above their more complicated watches made of precious materials. Luckily, people caught on to the idea, and the company was saved. Okay, so with that bit of history behind us, let's see what the Seiko ferry brought in. Okay, so here we have the Seiko SNKK59 that I got offline with its octagonal shape, just like the Nautilus. And here are some parts from Yobokies, which is a guy who makes aftermarket Seiko parts. Here are the hands and the dial that he calls the Nautilida. Here's the movement. This is the NH35 and the stem. Now, the movement NH35 has just the date, whereas the NH36 has both the day and the date. So let's go ahead and get the bracelet off. This bracelet sort of has that integrated look about it, but it is held on by these pins, and these spring bars are probably the shortest I have ever seen. Let's open up the case. Take a look at the original 7S26 movement. Now, to get the old movement out, first we have to pull the crown out. To do that, there is this little tab right there with a divot on it. You take a toothpick, because you don't want to scratch things up, and push down on it, and then pull the crown out. Okay, so now taking the crown off of the stem is probably the hardest part, and it may be on there really tight. I'm gripping the stem with the smooth part of these pliers so I don't damage it, but you can easily break the stem, so you can take it to a watchmaker if it's really stuck. Next, we try to get the movement out. I take just a small screwdriver and I pry on some of the metal plates. Make sure you're not prying on the gears or the balance. Take the movement out, set it on something soft, and we're gonna be ditching this entire assembly. This is the new movement. You you see on the back of the dial, there are these small feet, and they should line up with the movement if you bought parts that match. Make sure the movement is nice and secured with the dial. And then we temporarily put the new stem and crown back in and set the date. You want to make sure you just click over the date, so everything should be lined up at the 12 o'clock position. First, we take the hour hand, line it up with 12 o'clock. Take this hand installer. Now this comes with a whole assembly, but I find that I get better precision if I just take the tip and use my fingers. And then the minute hand, get that lined up. And what I'll do is take the toothpick that I had before, use it to help sort of coax the hand into position while I push down with the other one. The second hand is probably the most delicate part of this whole thing. You want to rest the hand right on the little stem that it eventually fits into, and then take a hand installer with a smaller hole and delicately push it down. This probably took me a good half an hour with a lot of cursing. We need to cut the stem into the right length. And I'm not wearing gloves because I took a break and I forgot. So you guys can flame me in the comments here. Okay. Now you want to cut it a little bit at a time and continue to refit it until it's the right length, because you don't want to cut too much. Then you will need a new stem. So thread the old crown back into the new stem, because the new movement takes a different stem than the old S7, S26 movement. So then we blow everything off with this little pump. Make sure there's no dust that's collected between the dial and the case. Find the 3 o'clock position on both pieces and fit it back in. Make sure it's firmly seated, and take the stem and crown and insert it back. Find that little tab, push it down, get the crown back in. Now if you did everything right, it should catch, and you want to, before you put the case back on, make sure that everything is in working order. The first position, set the date, and then the second position, make sure that you can set the time. Now when I went to reinstall the case back, I realized it was pushing so hard on the movement, it was smashing the second hand into the back of the crystal. And so I had to sand off a little bit off the inside lip of the case back to get it to fit right. I think the movements may be slightly different heights. So we reinstall everything, and there it is. Whew, what a whirlwind. Okay, so you should probably know that that was like 3 hours of filming, all condensed down to a few minutes. My best advice would be, if you get frustrated, just take a break. And if you get really stuck, please consult a watchmaker before you break things. Okay, so let's slap the bracelet back on and take it out for a spin. Okay, let's get some of the dimensions out of the way. It has a case diameter of 40 millimeters, a lug width of 10 millimeters, and a lug-to-lug distance of 43 millimeters. Looking at it from the side, it's got a thickness of 10.5 millimeters. Here is the NH35 movement beating away behind a transparent caseback. Now the watch does retain its original mineral glass crystal, and there is no anti-reflective coating. The lume is serviceable, but does fade rather quickly. The watch looks great in the light, and the dial has a subtle radiance about it. It's also pretty comfortable to wear, owing to how thin it is. I think if I was to make one more upgrade to this watch, it would be to change out the stamped Seiko clasp. Okay guys, so that was a pretty fun little build, and it didn't cost an arm or a leg. Now, I would never pawn that off as a real Nautilus, but at the same time, it's pretty cool to be wearing a watch that you assembled yourself. So I encourage you to try it. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit the subscribe button below so you don't miss future ones. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Retro Watch Channel. So until next time, take care.